Chapter 13. I kicked and struggled, but whatever had me by the ankle was stronger than I was. I could have looked down and seen what had got hold of me, but I was too scared. There are some pretty big fish and turtles in Lake Michigan. Besides, I couldn't take my eyes off the light coming down from the surface. It was getting farther and farther away as I went down into the darkness. My lungs hurt. I wanted air. I wanted to live. I wanted Mom and Dad. All of a sudden, I was going up toward the light like a cork. Whatever had hold of my ankle had let go. I was kicking like mad. I burst out of the water into the sunlight. I gulped air. I turned around and floated on my back. I was so glad to be alive that I almost forgot about being 15 miles from shore and sure to drown. I looked into the blue sky. "Victor, you must be crazy. You hire a guide and then you don't do one damn thing he tells you." It was Charlie. As I spun around to see where his voice was coming from, my feet touched bottom. We were standing in shallow water. There was a beach and trees about 100 yards off. "I had to dive back under the barrier and drag you here," Charlie said. "You were starting off for Hogborough without so much as a fare-thee-well, you maniac." Charlie was telling me that I was crazy. I was about to say something about that when I remembered that there was an island, and I was standing on the bottom, and that Claudia was paddling around, looking mad as a wet hen, which she was. "I'm sorry," I said. "I guess I panicked." "No need to apologize," Charlie said. "It's all in a day's work for a licensed guide. Now let's get on shore and get our clothes on. They'll be coming to meet us soon." We walked through the shallow water to the beach. Beyond the beach there were a lot of tall trees with silvery trunks. We got into our clothes. Claudia was walking around and sort of shaking herself and muttering. "There should be some lizards along to meet us any minute," Charlie said. "We'd better wait on the beach. There may be wild pigeons in the woods." "How are the lizards going to know we're here?" I asked. "We didn't make a lot of noise or tell them to expect us or anything like that. And what does it matter if there are pigeons in the woods?" "First of all, the lizards know that we're here. You can be sure of that. There's very little happens on this island that the lizards don't know about. As for the pigeons, there goes one now." Charlie pointed to a perfectly ordinary pigeon flying overhead. That is, it seemed perfectly ordinary until it came down a few 100 feet, and I could see it was as big as a horse. Claudia growled. "Can those things hurt us?" I asked Charlie. "Do you want to find out?" Charlie said. "No, but I mean, you've been here before." "Who has?" he asked. "But you know all about how to get here, and the lizards and the big pigeons. How'd you find all that stuff out?" Charlie tilted his head toward the chicken. "Claudia," I said. "Claudia told you all about this?" "You really ought to get to know Claudia," Charlie said. "She's a very interesting bird, been everywhere, knows things." Claudia was watching the big pigeon flying away in the distance and sort of snarling. You'd think it would be sort of a shock to meet lizards that walk on their hind legs and stand about 5 feet tall. I mean, even after seeing them on television, it would have to be a little strange to meet them face to face. But something had been happening over the past few days. I was getting more and more used to the way lizards looked, their expressions and all. They seemed pretty human-looking, and I wasn't too upset by the appearance of the lizards who came to meet us. There were maybe a dozen of them. They came out of the trees, walking easily on their hind legs. They walked toward us. It was eerie, the green lizards and the silvery trees. The sand was yellow, and the sky and water were deep blue. It was like a dream. I mean, it was really happening, I knew that, but it was so vivid. The focus was so sharp, and there didn't seem to be any sound. The lizards walked silently, and the lake was silent. Even Claudia had shut up. I don't even remember hearing myself breathe. "5 men," the lizard said. "5 men like us." They were looking at our hands. "Isn't Ferguson with you?" one of the lizards asked. It was the first time I had ever seen Charlie look surprised. "How do you know about Ferguson?" he asked. "You're the chicken man, aren't you?" a lizard asked. "And that's Claudia, and that's Victor, right?" "How did you know that?" Charlie asked. He really looked funny. He was sort of gasping and working his eyebrows. "We saw you on television," one of the lizards said. "You're the most popular show in town. We've been watching you for weeks. Everybody especially likes it when Shane Ferguson makes chocolate sodas for Claudia." Charlie whispered to me, "They've been watching us while we're watching them. Their television must work differently." "How rude of me not to introduce myself," the lizard who had been doing all the talking said. "I am Reynold, and these are my friends Reynold, 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 and Reynold." "Is everybody here called Reynold?" I asked. "Of course not," Reynold said. "That would be ridiculous. There are lizards named Raymond and Helena and a lot of things." While we were talking with the lizards, we had begun to walk. It was soundless walking, the way the lizards had walked when I first saw them. I was doing it too. I know that walking on a sandy beach doesn't make any noise, but this was even quieter. Usually you could hear some sound, sand shifting, your own breathing, someone else's breathing, your clothes rustling, something clinking in your pocket, but this walking was without a sound. We walked through the silvery trees. The floor of the forest was sandy. We walked without saying anything. Sometimes the lizards were ahead of us, sometimes they were behind us. Claudia was sitting on Charlie's shoulder with her head tucked under her wing. We came to a hilly place in the forest. The trees were thicker. Streams ran through the forest, sometimes at the bottom of deep channels. There was a good smell. It wasn't a regular forest smell. It was spicy, like cookies at Christmas time. Once or twice I thought I heard music, lizard music, in the distance. We walked for a long time and fairly fast. I never got tired. The cool, spicy air made me feel very wide awake. We had been going up and downhill for some time, but mostly uphill. The sky was turning yellow. The leaves on the trees were getting less green and taking on a pale blue color. The spice smell was very strong. It made me hungry and made me feel as though I had just eaten something nice both at once. The sand was a very bright yellow color, like gold. Still silence, still going fast, still going uphill mostly. It was the best walk I've ever taken in my life. There were times when I didn't notice anything about the air and the trees and the yellow sky. I just felt the pleasure of moving, just walking. It was so easy. Walking can be wonderful. I didn't have a thought in my head. I wasn't curious about where we were going. I didn't care if we never got anywhere. Just walked and walked through the beautiful forest day and night forever. I never really dreamed there was so much to walking. Other times I studied the shapes of leaves and the colors of things and what shadows did as we passed through them. Even when I wasn't thinking, I was taking everything in. If I knew how to draw, I could draw a picture of every single leaf and tree and grain of sand that I passed on that walk. I could count the leaves in my picture and then go back to the spot. No, more leaves would have grown. I could take a photograph that was made that day and count the leaves in the photograph, and every leaf that was in the photograph would be in my drawing. If you really look at something, really look at it, not staring or trying to memorize it or anything, just look at it easily, but really look at it like I was doing on that walk, you will never forget even the smallest detail of what you've seen. I learned that in the forest. After a while it became obvious that we were climbing a mountain. Things were getting steeper and steeper, and whenever I looked back, I looked down. I really liked being high up. I had never been that high before. There aren't any hills at all where I live. In fact, the city of Hogborough built a hill in the city park so kids would know what one looked like. Sometimes I could see over the tops of the trees all the way to the beach and the lake. The forest was getting thinner, and the soil was starting to get rocky. Sometimes I had to use my hands to get over big rocks. Of course, the lizards just skittered over the rocks when they went on all fours. They were so fast you could hardly see them. Soon there weren't any more trees, just rocks. I could see almost the whole island. When it got really steep, a lizard would give me a push from behind or dangle a tail for me to hold on to. There were clouds around us. Sometimes we could look down at a cloud. The rocks were a grayish-blue color. Some of them were green. We went up and up. It seemed like forever. I was starting to get just a little bit tired. "We'll take a rest up there, Victor." It was Reynolds who spoke, the first Reynolds, the one who spoke to us on the beach. Now, this is sort of funny. Even though all the lizards were named Reynolds, and of course they looked pretty much identical, I could always tell which was which. Later, when I talked to a bunch of lizards named Reynolds, if I was to say Reynolds, only the one I meant would respond. I mean, it worked talking to the lizards. I always knew which one I was talking to, and they always knew too. The place Reynolds had pointed out was a little patch of grass at the very top of this big mountain. There were some big smooth rocks and a sort of thing like a tent without sides, just a roof. It turned out to be made of gold. We all sat down under the gold roof supported by wooden poles and cooled off. Someone had left baskets there. They were perfectly round, a little bigger than basketballs, with handles on top. Reynolds, another one, opened them and handed around something between cakes and cookies. They didn't taste exactly like anything I'd ever eaten, and they tasted a little like everything I'd ever eaten, all at the same time. They were very interesting. I had two. There were also bottles of something like very good lemonade, only not made from lemons. It is the only stuff I ever drank that was without a doubt better than grape soda. Reynolds, the first one, explained to us that we were not on top of a mountain. Actually, we were on the edge of the crater of a big volcano. We could almost see that. The ridge curved away from us in both directions, making part of a circle. We couldn't see the whole circle or down into the crater because there were a lot of clouds. The lizards were planning to take us down into the crater, and the volcano wasn't active, and inside the crater was the main city of the island, Thunderbolt City. The name of the whole island was Diamond Hard. Diamond Hard is a translation. The name in their language sounds something like Nibelin, which is sort of squeaked in a very high-pitched voice with a sort of rush of air. The lizards have a very weird language. About this time, Charlie brought up the question of how come the lizards could all speak English. Reynold, another one, explained when humans invented television, the lizards started picking it up on their sets. They had television a long time before we did. Human television became very popular with the lizards. They did almost nothing but watch it for the first few years. As I said before, they can receive not only the programs, but the people watching the programs, and they can watch hundreds or even thousands of shows at once. It's a whole different system. Their sets are big cylinders, maybe 6 feet high and 2 feet across, and they spin. There's a sort of pin running down through the center of the cylinder, and it is held top and bottom by a frame of some kind of black stone. When a lizard wants to watch television, he gives the cylinder a spin, and it will keep spinning for hours. Little blue sparks appear at both ends of the cylinder. I know I'm not explaining this very well, but I really don't understand it. Anyway, they watch television with their eyes closed. They just sit in the room with the spinning cylinder and close their eyes and see all the shows on TV and all the people watching the shows all at once. When human television got popular, all of the lizards began speaking English. They had known about it from radio for a long time, and some lizards spoke it, but when TV came along, it got to be sort of a fad. All the lizards loved Groucho Marx and Walter Cronkite. It was the mustaches that they liked, Reynolds said. I was really glad to know that someone beside me appreciated Walter Cronkite. It was pleasant, sitting under the golden roof, having the nice lizard snacks, and listening to Reynolds explain things about Diamond Hard and the lizards. All the Reynolds were very nice to us and kept asking us if they could get us anything and were we comfortable. But the one thing they were really nice to was Claudia. I mean, they just kept hovering around her and sort of smiling at her. I mean, lizards don't actually smile, but they looked at her in a sort of pleasant way. It seemed as though the lizards were happy to have us visit them, but they were really thrilled that Claudia was with them. Claudia seemed to be enjoying herself. Her feathers had dried, and she was sort of showing off, chicken-like, fluffing her feathers and clucking and tilting her head to one side. The lizards took it all in. Whenever she took a drink of the lemonade stuff or ate some of the cake crumbs, they would get all excited and look at each other and say things in lizard talk. That was about the only time I heard the lizards speak their own language, when they were excited. The rest of the time they all spoke English, even little kids. I suppose they had never seen a chicken, and that's why they were so excited, but it turned out to be something else. Coming down the inside of the crater was not easy. The clouds, once you got into them, were just fog, wet and dark and hard to see through. The rocks were wet and slippery. I didn't like it. The lizards didn't have any trouble, of course, and they sort of crowded around us and kept us from falling. Still, it was slow and wet and unpleasant. It must have taken us an hour to come down out of the clouds.